Okay, everyone, hello. This is Bill Acevedo. Welcome to Dell Networking OMNM Tech Talk. And in today's feature, we're going to talk about file management. And this is going to be a multi-part series. And so today we hope to cover the groundwork for how file management works for backup, restore, and deploy. And then we'll have a follow-on session or two with some specific troubleshooting topics. So by the way, we are recording this session and you will get a copy of this, and so no need to take notes. I think we need to start with basically showing the outline of the process for file management. And so I drew up a diagram here to kind of help us understand how the OMNM process works. So what we're seeing here on the left, it says server 10.35.35.181. This is my Linux server, in my case, that's hosting an OMNM instance. And so there's some areas of confusion are the internal server versus the external server. I want to clear that up. OMNM currently ships with an internal server, but it is only applicable to Windows. And this is actually a file server that is within the application. That is in context to what we call an external server, which is outside of OMNM. And so Windows will support an external server, and Linux must have an external server. There is no internal server that is shipped with Linux. And I want to clarify that there is on the VM instance that we ship, there is a server that is already installed and pre-configured. But in relation to my diagram and the server, that external server that I see at the bottom here resides on this physical server over here, but is not part of OMNM. And so that's why I have this little box here that says the virtual appliance external file server is here. For the sake of this diagram, we're going to refer to the external server here. It shows it outside the box, but just be aware it can be inside of this on the same server that OMNM resides as well. So there's three elements. We talked about the server, the OMNM server, we talked about the file server, and then there's the third element is the network device that we're backing up. So let's just step through the process of what happens during a file backup process. Number one, you're on OMNM and you say backup the device. Well, OMNM sends a command to the device, and here's an example for Force 10. We say, basically using SFTP and the username to log into the server is FTP user, and the IP address of my server happens to be 10.35.35.181. That just happens to be my file server address here, because that's where my virtual appliance server resides. It's the same IP. So we tell the device to go to that box, log in with FTP user, and this is the default file name here. So we send this command to the device. The device then executes that command and says, go and get that file from that server. So we see here step two, the file server moves the file to the directory using the specified protocol, and this is going to be dependent on what's been configured for the management interface of the device. But it will use that protocol to go and put the file onto the external server. Okay. Next step here, number three, is when that file is put on there, and OMNM gets acknowledgement from the device, then OMNM goes and does an FTP get and gets that file from that file server. This is an important piece here, and this is why the file server for FTP or SCP, TFTP, whatever you're doing, they all have to be the same directory, because OMNM is going to go and get it from the directory that the device puts it into. So that's why they have to be in sync. Okay, so that's a high-level overview, and you can refer to this diagram, for example. And then I'm going to talk about the opposite process for pushing a file to a device, so restoring or firmware deploy. In this case, they get the same elements in place here, but it's going to be in the opposite order here. Number one, OMNM is going to push the firmware or the restore file via FTP to the server, or the file server directory. So they're going to push it to the file server. And right after that, it's going to send a command to the device and say, device, run this command, logging into the FTP server, and get the file from the device. So it's just a little bit of a reverse process. Okay, so this diagram will come into play when we talk about troubleshooting and where the points of failure are. So let's first start with what do we do first in OMNM to get a basic backup and restore to work. So let me bring up that diagram here. The first thing we do is create the file server, and there's a couple places to do that. We can go into admin. We've got a little bit of a slow server here. Okay, go into admin, and there's a spot down here for common setup task, net restore file servers, where you can go in and create your file servers. And you'll notice here that this is the Linux VM, and you're only going to have the option for external. It does not support that internal, as I mentioned. But the other place to go is in the resources file management. And here you can also add new file servers. Simply right-click in New and add a new one. The added benefit in this section is you can also test your server to make sure that it works. So a couple things to note here is I'll look at a couple of my file servers here. I have two set up. I have one set up for secure protocol, meaning I'm choosing secure FTP SCP. And again, I'm using my server login and password. And then I've also set up one for my devices that don't support SCP. And so we have basically an option for FTP and TFTP. Now you can put as many as you want in here in terms of your file servers. They can be different file servers on different systems. What's going to happen when you execute a backup or restore, it's going to go down this order here. And it's going to, first of all, it's probably going to pick the most secure one. There's some algorithm to tell it to pick the most secure protocol. But the first one that it hits that's successful, it will use that one. Okay, a couple things on the file server. I'm going to go back into that edit screen. So we talked about you can set your settings here. This is set your IP address of your file server. There's this other field over here called external IP address. This can be ignored for the most part by most people. I'm going to bring up another diagram that's going to explain when you would use this external file server setting. So we bring that up here. Here's an example. So here we have the file server here, but there are some cases where you have the network device over here on the right. It cannot see directly the IP address that this file server is on 10.35.35.181. For whatever reason, there's various environments where you'll find this. And so while OMNM can see this IP address, the device cannot. And so what we end up having in some cases is two NICs where the device or network known by a different IP, they know this file server by a different IP. So this is what we refer to as the external IP, this NIC2. And so in this case, this is important because what happens is, again, back to the command we send. We're going to send the command. Oops. We're not done yet. Again, when we send the command to the device, we're going to tell the device to copy some file with some login to some server. And so this is where the command gets put in. If you populated that external IP, you're going to populate this secondary IP address in the command. So the device knows I'm going to do a copy run to TFTP or FTP, and it knows to go to this NIC. It's going to put it in the same directory like normal with a normal FTP server or TFTP server. And so that when OMN comes along and does a get, it's going to go to this IP address, the NIC1, but the file is still there in the right location. So it knows how to get that file. So it's a bit of an edge case. Normally this does not need to be filled in, so you can ignore it unless you have a situation as I just described. Okay, so then we're going to talk about just quickly how to back up a device. There's a variety of ways. The resources. And you probably already know about the ability to just do right-click, file management, and here you can do any of your activities, backup, restore, deploy. And so just going through one here, I'm not going to execute it, but I want to show you some of the options here. There are standard options here for naming. You can name your file anything you want. But a couple things that are a little bit maybe unknown is this transfer protocol. Now this is going to be, there's an algorithm that's going to decide based on what the capabilities of the device are. Does it support FTP, SCP, or whatever? And then it's also going to be in the context of the file service you have defined. It's going to choose the most secure protocol by default, but you can force other protocols. Just be aware that if your device doesn't support FTP, you go to try to do it, it's going to fail. Okay. The other part here is the add user label. And so what this is this is an ability to label your backups so that you can have, for example, let's say you just discovered your entire network and you want to back up all your devices, and you want to call that a gold config. You know that all your devices are in a good state, everything is working, and so you can just simply type in whatever label you want, and it will back it up and persist that file to that label. And so you see here a couple examples I have. One is gold, one is just a date and a good configs, and so you can label them that way. And so the benefit here is that when you go to restore, you can possibly restore to a specific label. In fact, if you had all your devices labeled as gold and you have a network outage, you go, I don't know what to do. I need to just push all my base configs back out that I know are working. You could go and restore all of your configs to that gold config and push the configs back on the boxes all at the same time, or individually if you wish. Okay, and so that's an interesting thing to know about. And then obviously you can email if you want to the results. And then obviously you can add some equipment here or add groups if you want to, static or dynamic groups. If you want to, you can change that and back up all your, you can create your own groups, static or dynamic, or use the preceding ones that we have. Another concept here is the file you're going to back up. This might change down here depending on the device type. For the Power Connect devices in this device, we have a backup config. We could back up a running config or a startup. And so you would just set that and then click execute and go, and it will go back up the file. Another way to do this is through file management. This configuration file portlets, I'm going to go ahead and expand this. But this is just basically a list of all the config files. And so you can set specific filters and say, I just want specific equipment or equipment groups if you want. And so I can pick, one or two, say one device I'm interested in all their config files. I can go to that box, select it, then hit go. I can pause, I can save that if I want to. I just call this demo here. And save that. Now I can see all the config files for this box. I can then push from here the same way I did from the resource manager. I can assign a label if I didn't label it, but then I can restore right here, back at it. I can back up the device again if I want to. So that's another way to do it. Restore is the exact same process. Right-click from the resource manager, or you can go to these files to restore. Talk quickly about deploy here. Let me go to my resources. Actually, I'm going to show you two places here. I'm sorry, on the home page. You can deploy from over here, OS image deploy, where you upload. And so you do need to import images most of the time. And I shouldn't say most of the time, but there's images that we precede. If you don't have it, you will need to upload it. What I want to show you is from file management also. We have an image repository on the right here, and so you can deploy directly from here. Let me go ahead and expand that. And so you can directly deploy from here. Want to note a couple of new features in the 6.2 Service Pack 2, where now you can go and get specific firmware from the Dell site specifically. There's a whole bunch of different things you can download here. DNOS or FTOS firmware. This just takes you to specific links. See if we can get out there. And so you're basically given links to different things. You can just click on these and allow you to download it. So this is going to be a two-step process. You need to download this outside of OMNM to some directory, and then you need to go back into OMNM and then import it. And that way you'll have it available in this list. So the way you import is from that other page. You can see the import option to bring that particular firmware in. But similar case here for deploys here, and let me just go to pick a firmware here. So something like this, I want to deploy it. You just click deploy, and you're given similar options. Again, it's just the same push process where we push the file out and then give a command for the box to actually upgrade that image. Again, you have the same transfer protocol options. You can add your equipment here if you have one or more devices, and then depending on the devices you select, there may be specific options here that you want to set. But they're similar to. Let me see if I can find one here. End device here. Add selection done. There's no specific option, it looks like, here for this device. So you would just click execute or schedule it as you see fit. Okay. That was a high-level pass. I was trying to keep this short, under 15 minutes. Looks like we've done a good job. A couple of other things I want to cover here on external file servers. And so as I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention, let me go back up here. This internal file server is generally intended for very small deployments, under 10 devices kind of thing. Generally not recommended for production usage. It's not the kind of file server you can log into and see files on. It basically renders a password very quickly whenever a transaction takes place. It does the put or get operation and then closes it down, and you don't have access to it. And so generally we expect you to have an external file server when you do this. And it seems to work fine even for production environments, but it's just not recommended for there's a variety of performance issues that you may come across related to that server. And so for that reason, we do recommend other servers. For your use here, I've added some references to what we recommend. If you want to install an external server on a Windows operating system, we recommend TFTP daemon 64 for 32-bit, 64-bit machines, and if you need TFTP, you can use TFTP D32. On a Linux operating system, Linux comes with a native TFTP, FTP, SCP type program, and so you can freely use that as well as an external server on any box. The .08 is pre-configured with this already, and then you can refer to the documentation on the virtual appliance to see the details regarding the credentials and that sort of thing for that TFTP, FTP, SCP server. And as I mentioned, these servers must be in read-write on those directories and to the same directory. Again, that's for that process we just described. Okay, as I mentioned, this is just a high-level pass, and we're going to have a one session, and we're going to talk about troubleshooting specific areas in this diagram. Let me go up one more here. In these diagrams here, we're going to talk about, errors possibly between the server and the device, then errors between the device and the file server, and maybe even between the OpenManage trying to get files off of the file server. So that'll be in our next segments. I'm going to go ahead and terminate my portion here. If anyone has any questions on this file management or even on anything else in the product, please feel free to type it in the chat window or raise your hand and I can unmute you. We'll give you just a minute here. I do see a question here on the label deploy. How do I push that out to multiple devices? It's a good question. We have this concept of the groups, obviously, that people should know about, groups and locations. So say, for example, you had a group of devices that you call, it could be, our preceded group, or it could be your own, my edge devices or my N1500s or whatever it is. So you just go to the group and you can do a file management here, deploy. And here it's just doing it to a group, and so you do have the option here. I think you have the options here. Add group. And oh, I'm sorry. The question wasn't about deploy. It was about restore to a group. Sorry, I was going to the deploy process. Again, let me just pick. You can still do the same thing. Let me go to management, and we want to go to restore. That's where the labels are at. And so this is where you can select your group here. You can do this with this bus as well, but you select your group, and then once you select it, you're given the option here to restore to a label. And so I could say I want to restore my gold config. I would apply this, and you would see the gold config would not populate. And so it's going to go look for this gold label on every device that has a backup with a gold label, and it's going to push that exact config file back to all your devices. So again, as I mentioned, that's a way to quickly restore all your devices back to what you think is their gold state. All right, any other questions? Hang on here, my window here is really tiny. I'm trying to expand it. I can expand. Why is that so many? Let me go to the top here. And one question here is, can you putty in the file server to download files this way? So you can use putty. You can. This obviously this is how the device works. If you were to capture, let me just go back here. I'm not sure I got the question here, but let me just go and capture. If you were to go into OpenManage and capture this command line right here, for example, SFTP:/FTP user, and then this whole string here to this file. You could cut and paste this. You could log into the device, into the config mode, and that command, and the device will respond just as if OpenManage sent the command, and it will download the file onto the config file the exact same way. Now, if the question is, can I download a file from PuTTY? Let's say you downloaded a file via PuTTY to some location on your local box. How do you get that into OpenManage? Well, that is also supported. So that's simply, let's go into my file management here. In my configuration area, I can just simply do an import. And when you import, it's just going to ask you where to get that file. And you just go set the location and import it onto your box. And you're going to have that then as a listed config file you can deploy to a box. So yeah, you can do that. You can do export existing ones. If you want to export a file and then modify it somehow outside, there's ways to modify it here. Obviously, we can go in and edit the config file directly, but if you were to export something, you could import it as well. So here you have the option to modify your config file and then save it, and what it'll do is it'll save it as a new version, as the latest version. Okay, see here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording portion so it doesn't go too long, but I'm going to